that original person's ideas are still going to be reported because somebody's passion was connected to that. It doesn't necessarily need to be his, and his original why response out of the data can also be reportable too if you click on it. But as long as somebody's why field is attached to that, it'll get reported. It doesn't necessarily need to be his.
Okay, I think that will probably come back to that later. I'm sorry, I've tried to make the phone stop ringing.
Sure.
That's the problem meeting in houses. So, so I think what we've got is so that the report that you're able to generate imagine we're at the end of the youth. The 20 and under group has met. They've reached an agreement. Now, there are going to be some people who put in their what, why, how, who are not going to be physically present at the meeting.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, what will the report look like? So we have the meeting. They reach agreement on goals. They come up with passion words, and they then attach their passion word to one of the goals.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what we do as researchers is, I assume that we capture these on laptops in Microsoft Word or something like that.
Yeah, that's always the best way.
And paste them into the database.
Right.
Rather than trying to have the database be online.
Right.
While we're talking, right?
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what's the report look like, or the reports look like, that you will be able to produce for them?
Sure. So, do you want to know what it physically looks like, or what's contained in it?
Let's do both.
Okay. So, I don't think I have an example. Let me see if I'll look around while I'm talking and see if I have an example I can show you.
This might be a good place before we do this to take a break.
Sure.
Because you're going to be showing us some examples as we go forward. What are the questions that you guys have? Right. So let's walk through. The big picture is step 1, create survey. Right. Okay. Step 2 is people put in input and they assign themselves to separate groups. Okay. Step 3, you go in and create tags, putting like with like in for each group prior to that group's meeting. Then you go to that group's meeting and you're able to hand them a report as they come into the meeting that has their input and that also has the draft goals you've come up with the goals of all of them, so they can see on that piece of paper, yes, he put or she put the goals, lumped them correctly, or no, I don't think she lumped them correctly. But they can, it's very transparent. They can see what you've done. Then in the room, as we'll go, there's the why conversation, you remember, before you do that first. Then a what negotiation. In the why conversation, people who are physically present come up with a passion word. Then at the very end, after they negotiate and agree on the goals, the last step is they take and tell you which of those goals their passion word is the most closely connected with. Then, as a researcher, you go back into the database, you go back to their original whats, and you assign one of those goals as the tag. It replaces the tags. So now, every one of the original goals that the individuals put in is connected to one of their group's goals. Now you can produce a report that is, here's the group's goal number 1. Here are the individual goal statements that, in a sense, produced or are connected with that. And here are the why stories in the room and other why stories you may have selected that are particularly good in the database. And they're showing. And here are all of the hows that are connected. If you wanted to give them that whole report, you could.
Where did the how come in the conversation in the room?
It doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't yet.
Okay.
Right. So what's happening is that you're able to go back in and And what my actual experience is that sometimes people will put in 2 goals in the first block, and I'll go in and physically move them so that I separate the 2 from each other.
Right.
And sometimes the hows that you can look at them and you can see actually that they put one in the first box that's really connected to the second one. So I'll go and play with that and clean up the data a little bit, knowing that in the very end, I'm going to be able to give them a report if they want it, in which all of their group's goals are printed out for them along with the why stories and the how ideas, so that they can see here, it's transparent, that they can see it all. Have I summarized this accurately?
Yeah. Yep.
Then what's going to happen is you're going to go to the intergroup negotiation. Okay? So
right.
Why don't you walk us through what happens to the data after that last step?
Sure. So basically, if you look again at that last little graphic there at the bottom that describes how the database pulls all of the individual whats and hows into that group goal, basically the same process happens after you do the intergroup work. So, Gene, you just asked about where's the conversation about the hows, So if you wanted to, and if a group was interested in it, they might take the time then, seeing that report, to actually plan out how their group is going to do work. For example, if they wanted to do some group work on their own as that group. However, what usually happens in the project is that you want to get to the intergroup level before you start doing the action planning, so that you're not sort of overlapping work, and you can sort of, now you have shared goals among all the groups and you're working toward those shared goals. So that next step then is getting representatives of each of those groups in the room. And in the same way that you brought the group goals to the groups to refine, you now bring all of the agreed upon group goals together with this intergroup, with this shared, with this larger group of representatives. And they work on, okay, your group said A, B, and C, our group said X, Y, and Z, and this group said 1, 2, and 3. So are there shared ideas among our 3 groups? Are there contrasting ideas? Are some of our groups going in different directions? Are there unique ideas? And they go through the same process of sort of framing their goals as an intergroup. So if you imagine it as, I've sat down at the computer, I've given my perception as an individual. As an individual, this is how I feel, this is what I want to see. Then you come into that smaller group that you've self-identified, and now you're sort of You're doing some consensus building, and you're trying to find some shared agreement in a small group about, okay, maybe I can let go of this, and maybe I can adopt your idea, because as a group we're moving towards something. And now you do the same thing at the intergroup level. You say, okay, our group wants this, your group wants that, your group wants that. How do we as a collection of groups come to a shared agreement about what we all want? And we don't have to agree on everything that's up there. But can we find some areas of agreement that we can, as an intergroup, work toward? And after you have that data, after you have those shared ideas, and this is where the database gets a little more complex, and we won't really have time to look at this piece of it in terms of how to manipulate the database this morning. But then you go back in as a researcher and you add in these new shared goals among the groups. And you do the same thing with the passion words. And again, the database remembers all the way back to that individual person's responses and collects them all appropriately. So now you have these shared goals among all of these groups and all of these individuals, and the database remembers exactly where they came from and pulls all of the whats, all of the whys, and all of the hows into the appropriate categories, so that now, at the end of it all, you've got some shared goals for everybody, and maybe some unique and maybe even some contrasting goals, some things you'll have to work on as an organization that you want to go 2 different directions, or as a group of people, whoever this is that's taking the survey. But you have hopefully at least 1 or 2 major shared goals that you're going to work on. And again, the database pulls all of that information forward once you begin to put the right data in. back into it. And I can briefly show you how that works, but it's not necessarily that it's so advanced, but I think in the time that we have this morning, these beginning stages are probably a little more important to be really clear about, and then the next stages you can begin to discover as you do the intergroup work.
Here's the sort of to summarize, and what I want you guys to imagine is the following. I want you to imagine a report in which the first page is, here are the 5 goals. And the second page is, it has the first goal in the middle. And around that goal are the passion words that people put with that word. And then around that on the page, like a magazine page, are why stories that relate to those passion words and that goal. You turn the page, there's the next goal. And it's got its passion words and why stories. You turn the page. Here are the passion words and the why stories. And that's what people are going to read. What they're going to read is the stories and the words. And then the report's going to say, here are the how suggestions that came with this goal. Now, I think that this gets a little tricky because so many of the how suggestions will be similar, and we're gonna have to work as a group on how do we create a report for these folks that is really useful to them, but is authentic and responsive to the input, so that people really do feel that their ideas are in the document. When I was talking to the executive director of the Jewish Federation of Nashville, he said, at one point he said, "What's the tchotchke?" You know that word? It's a Yiddish word for a little thing that you bring back from a trip and put on your, it's the little Milan statuette, right? That's sitting there. It's a little physical object that is a memento, a reminder of something that you've done. So he says, "What's the tchotchke?" And I think that when I've done this before, these reports, if they're attractive, that becomes part of the feeling that we succeeded.
Yep.
And that becomes what people see outside of the group and outside of the community. It is important for us to keep in mind, and I hope they'll keep in mind, that action is the desired result. But there is also a desired result for me, that they have a sense of accomplishment, and that we can do this, and that we did something, and that we did something difficult, that we did something that other people didn't expect. And it's that report that I think other communities might look at, that would be reported in the newspaper. People will say, wow. Now, Brandon, it is 10:22. I think we should take a 10-minute break.
Okay.